Eli Turner had always lived a simple life, and most people in town believed he preferred it that way. He woke up before sunrise, fed the horses, checked the fences, fixed whatever the wind had broken during the night, and returned home only when the sky turned orange. For years, nothing in his life changed. The ranch stayed quiet, the cattle moved at their slow rhythm, and Eli learned to enjoy the silence that other people found lonely. He was a man who asked for nothing and expected nothing, never thinking that one strange delivery would turn his whole world upside down. That morning, Eli had been riding back from checking a water trough when he saw a rider from town waving at him from the main road. It was the station agent from the railway depot, a friendly man named Howard. He usually visited only when something important needed signing. Eli wiped the dust from his hands and trotted over to him. Howard looked slightly nervous, which was unusual for a man who talked nonstop about trains, weather, cattle sales, and anything in between. Eli, Howard said, clearing his throat, "I've got something for you." Came on the early train. "For me?" Eli asked, confused. He rarely ordered anything, and when he did, it was usually small things like tools or rope. Nothing that would require personal delivery. Howard pointed toward the back of his wagon. Inside was a large wooden crate, almost the size of a small trunk but heavier looking, with thick rope tied around it. There was no label except a name and a short message written in careful handwriting. Eli leaned closer and felt a strange uneasiness settle in his stomach. The message read, "Deliver safely. Open it up." Now, Eli frowned. It didn't look like a mistake, but he also didn't recognize the handwriting. "Are you sure this is for me?" he asked. Howard nodded. "Your full name, your ranch address, and it's paid for in advance. I didn't bring it unless I was certain." Eli felt the weight of the moment without knowing why. He didn't like surprises, especially ones he didn't ask for. But he wasn't the type to refuse responsibility, especially when something had clearly been arranged with care. After a long pause, he said, "All right, help me load it." He carried the crate into Eli's barn together. It wasn't too heavy, but it was solid and sealed tight. Eli set it down carefully on a dry patch of ground. Howard watched him for a moment, then scratched the back of his head. "I don't know what it is," he admitted. But the man who handed it over looked serious. Said it was important. Eli tried to smile, though he felt anything but relaxed. "I'll figure it out." Howard nodded, climbed back into his wagon, and rode off. As the dust settled, Eli found himself alone with the mysterious crate. A part of him wanted to ignore the message and leave it sealed until he could make sense of the situation. But the words "open it up" now kept echoing in his mind. He stood there for several minutes, trying to decide if he should listen to a message from someone he didn't know. The crate didn't look dangerous. It was wooden, well-built, and tied shut, like someone wanted to protect what was inside. Still, he was cautious by nature, not fearful, just careful. Life on a ranch taught him that small mistakes could turn into big troubles. He finally brought over a small metal bar he used for prying open stubborn boards. As he held it in his hand, something made him stop again. He noticed faint scratches on the surface of the crate. They weren't deep, but they didn't look like marks made during normal shipping. They looked more like someone had tried to push or shift from inside. Eli frowned. That made no sense. Nothing alive should be inside a crate this size, and nothing that needed to move should ever be mailed this way. He crouched down, placed his ear against the wood, and held his breath. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, very softly, he heard what sounded like the faintest shift of cloth. It wasn't loud or alarming. It was real. Eli stood up straight, his heartbeat suddenly heavier. Someone was inside. Not something, someone. He felt a deep sense of responsibility settle into his chest. Whoever had sent this crate hadn't meant harm. The writing on the note was steady, careful. And if someone truly was inside, then leaving the crate sealed any longer wasn't an option. He slid the metal bar under the lid and gently pushed upward. The nails creaked, the wood groaned, and slowly, inch by inch, the crate began to open. Eli kept his movements careful. He didn't want to startle whoever was inside. when he finally lifted the lid completely. Sunlight spilled in, and Eli froze. Inside was a young woman, curled slightly to fit in the small space. She wasn't hurt, but she looked exhausted, as if she'd been traveling for far too long. A blanket was wrapped around her shoulders, and she held it close, not out of fear, but out of the need for comfort. Her hair was messy from the cramped space, and her eyes half open were soft but tired. For a moment, Eli couldn't speak. He had never expected to find a person, and certainly not someone so fragile-looking. The woman blinked a few times, adjusting to the light, then looked up at him. Her voice came out in a soft whisper. "Are you Eli Turner?" He swallowed and nodded. "Yes, that's me." Her eyes filled with relief, and she let out a slow breath. "Good, I made it." Eli didn't understand any of it. He knelt down so he wouldn't tower over her. "Ma'am, do you need help getting out?" She nodded. "Please." He offered his hand, but made sure she didn't feel pressured. She reached for him gently, holding on just enough for balance. He helped her stand, careful not to move too fast. When she stepped out of the crate, her legs shook slightly. She steadied herself by holding the edge of the crate. Eli waited patiently, giving her time. Once she could stand properly, she pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. She looked around the barn, taking in the beams, the smell of hay, the sound of distant cattle. It was clear she had no idea where she was. She didn't look frightened, only overwhelmed. "My name is Mara," she said softly. "I'm sorry for arriving like this. I know it must feel strange." "That's one word for it," Eli admitted quietly. But his voice was kind, not harsh. "Are you all right?" I think so. I'm just tired." She touched her forehead gently, as if steadying herself. "They told me it was the only way to travel safely. I didn't want to cause trouble." Eli shook his head. "You're not causing trouble. I just want to understand what's happening." Mara glanced down at the crate, then back up at him. "I'll explain everything, but not all at once. It's been a long journey." You could see that she meant it. She wasn't hiding anything. She was simply worn out. Eli nodded. "You can rest inside the house. There's clean water and food if you need it." Her eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you." They walked toward the house. Eli noticed how carefully she stepped, as if every movement was a reminder of the long time spent inside the crate. He walked beside her, not hovering, but close enough if she needed support. The air outside was warm and the sunlight bright, and he saw her close her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply as if she could finally relax. When they reached the porch, she paused and looked at him. "I didn't know what kind of man you were. I only knew you lived far from people and that you were honest." She hesitated, then added, "I'm glad they sent me to you." Eli felt a strange tightening in his chest, not fear, not confusion, but something unfamiliar. He didn't know who they were or why they trusted him, a simple rancher living a quiet life. But seeing Mara safe on his porch, looking at him with gentle trust, he sensed that whatever had brought her here wasn't a mistake. He opened the door for her, and she stepped inside slowly, her blanket still around her shoulders. She looked at the simple home, the wooden walls, the fireplace. The single table with 2 chairs in gave a small, peaceful smile. It was clear this place already felt safer than wherever she had come from. Eli stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her take in the room. He still had no answers, but he knew one thing for certain. The crate had delivered not just a mystery, but a person who needed help. And Eli Turner had never been the kind of man to turn away from someone who needed a safe place to breathe. He closed the door gently behind them. Unaware that this quiet moment marked the beginning of a story, neither of them could have expected one that would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. Mara sat quietly at Eli's kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of water. She held it as if it was something precious, something she had been waiting a long time for. Eli watched her from across the room, giving her space, not wanting to make her feel uncomfortable. He could tell she was trying to gather her thoughts, trying to find the right way to begin explaining how she had arrived in a crate on a stranger's ranch. The morning sun came through the window, lighting up the dust in the air and making the small room feel warmer than usual. Mara looked tired, but not afraid. She had a gentleness about her, a calmness that made Eli's normally quiet home feel different. Almost like it had been missing something he never noticed until now, after a long moment. She looked up with a small, apologetic smile. "I know you must be wondering why all of this happened," she said softly. Eli nodded, but without pressure. "Only if you're ready to talk. You can rest first if you need to." Mara shook her head slowly. "I think it's better if I tell you now. You deserve to know." She took a slow breath, steadying herself before continuing. "I grew up far away from here. My family had a small home, and we lived a simple life. Then, everything changed very quickly. My parents grew sick, and I had to travel out east for work to support myself. It wasn't easy, but I managed for a while." Eli listened, his hands folded loosely in front of him. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. He simply let her speak, knowing she needed to say things in her own time. "One day," she continued, "I met some people who promised they could help me find better work. They said they had connections, that they knew safe places where I could start over. At the time, it sounded like hope." She looked down at her cup, her fingers tightening slightly. But it wasn't. She didn't speak loudly or dramatically. Her voice remained soft, steady, calm. But the way she paused between sentences told Eli more than the words ever could. "They lied," she said. "I trusted the wrong people. And when I realized it, it was already too late." Eli felt a heavy stone settle in his stomach, but he stayed quiet. Mara didn't look frightened, as she spoke, just tired. "Worn down from the weight of everything she had carried alone, I was able to escape with the help of a friend," she continued. "He knew it wasn't safe for me to stay in the city. He also knew I didn't have anywhere else to go. So he came up with a strange plan, one even I didn't understand at first. He told me he knew someone honest, someone who lived far from the noise and problems of the world." Her eyes lifted to meet Eli's. "That person was you." Eli blinked, surprised. "How would he know me?" Mara smiled faintly. "He said he had met you once, years ago, during a cattle sale in town. He remembered how you talked straight, didn't show off, and didn't cheat anyone out of a single dollar. He said good men were and that you were one of them." She paused with a small breath. "He told me that if anyone could keep me safe while things settled, it would be you." Eli had no memory of meeting such a person, but he didn't doubt her story. People often remembered him more than he remembered them. He wasn't unfriendly, just quiet. It's the kind of man who didn't leave much of an impression except for honesty. "He arranged for me to be transported in that crate," Mara said quietly. "He said it was the only way to move without drawing attention. I didn't like the idea, but it was either that or stay where I wasn't safe." She looked down again. "I'm sorry I arrived in such a strange way. I didn't want to trouble you." "It's not trouble," Eli said gently. "It's just unexpected." She gave a small, relieved laugh, the first he had heard from her. "Unexpected for both of us." Eli brought her a bowl of warm soup. She thanked him softly and took a careful sip. For a few moments, there was only quiet, a peaceful quiet this time, not tense or confused. He watched her shoulders relax slightly, as if she felt safe enough to breathe properly for the first time in days. "Do you need a doctor?" he asked after a moment. "Or anything else?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "I'm not hurt. I'm just tired." He nodded, relieved. "You can stay here as long as you need. I don't have much, but what I have is yours to use." Her eyes softened. "You don't even know me, yet you're helping." Eli shrugged lightly, though the sincerity behind his words was strong. "Someone sent you here because they believed it was safer than where you came from. That's enough for me." Mara looked at him with quiet gratitude, and for a moment, the room felt warmer than it ever had before. After she finished eating, Eli showed her the small spare room he rarely used. The bed was clean, the window let in soft light, and there was a small dresser where she could keep whatever she had with her. Mara stepped inside, touching the blanket on the bed with a kind of disbelief. "This is more than I expected," she whispered. "It's simple," he said. "It's peaceful," she corrected gently. "And safe." Eli nodded. He didn't want to overwhelm her, so he let her settle in on her own. As he stepped away from the doorway, she called softly, "Eli." He turned back. "Thank you for trusting me," she said. Eli didn't know what to say to that. Trust wasn't something he gave easily, but something about her made him feel she spoke the truth. "You're welcome," he said simply. He returned to his usual chores, checking the barn, feeding the horses, gathering wood, but everything felt different. He found himself glancing toward the house more than usual. Not out of worry, but out of awareness. Someone was there. Someone quiet, gentle, and completely unexpected. Later in the afternoon, he saw Mara step outside onto the porch. She held the blanket around her shoulders, but looked steadier on her feet. She watched the open land with quiet wonder, taking in the fields, the grazing cattle, the endless sky stretching far beyond what the eye could see. "It's beautiful here," she said when Eli approached. "It's home," he replied. She smiled softly. "I've never lived anywhere so wide and open. It feels peaceful." Eli leaned on the porch railing beside her. "You can stay as long as you need. Nobody comes out this way unless they have a reason. I'm grateful for that," she said. "I don't have anywhere else to go." "You don't need anywhere else right now," Eli answered quietly. They stood there in silence, the wind moving gently through the grass. Mara closed her eyes slightly, letting the calm settle into her. For the first time since she had arrived, she didn't look tired, just thoughtful. "Your friend Eli?" said after a moment. "The one who sent you to me? Do you think he's safe?" Mara nodded slowly. "He is smart. He knows how to avoid trouble. He said he would send word when everything was clear." "You're waiting for good news," Eli said. "Yes," she whispered, and though she didn't say the next part out loud, Eli understood it just by the look on her face. She wasn't just waiting for news, she was waiting for a chance to start over. A chance to build a new life. A chance to finally breathe. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the ranch, Eli realized something strange. His home had always been quiet, always been empty, except for the sounds of animals and wind. But now, for the first time in years, that emptiness felt like it was fading. Someone was inside. Someone who trusted him. Someone who needed a safe place and chose to stay. He didn't know what the future would bring or how long she would remain. But he did know one thing. Her arrival had changed something deep inside him, something he wasn't ready to name yet. And as Mara stepped back into the house, her delicate footsteps echoing softly across the wooden floor, Eli felt a warmth settle in his chest that hadn't been there in a very long time. A quiet beginning had started between them, one built not from plans, but from trust, kindness, and simple human decency. And neither of them knew yet just how far this beginning would lead. The days that followed passed more gently than either Eli or Mara expected. Life on the ranch had a rhythm of its own, slow but steady, and Mara slowly settled into that rhythm without forcing anything. She woke early, helped Eli with small chores when she felt strong enough, and rested when she needed to. Eli watched her heal in quiet ways. Her steps grew firmer, her smile less guarded, her eyes calmer. He didn't ask questions unless she spoke first. He didn't push her to explain more than she wished. He simply offered kindness, and she accepted it with gratitude. One morning, Eli found Mara standing near the wash line behind the house, hanging freshly rinsed clothes one by one. The sunlight touched her hair gently, and she breathed in the warm air, as if this simple act meant something important. Eli approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "You don't have to do that," he said softly. "You're still resting." Mara looked over her shoulder and smiled. "I want to help. I've been doing very little these last days. It feels good to do something again." Eli nodded, though he felt a protective ache inside him. He didn't want her to feel like she owed him anything. "As long as you don't tire yourself," he said. "I won't," she promised. She hung another piece of clothing and watched it sway lightly in the breeze. The land around them stretched wide and open, the green pastures rolling toward the distant hills. She let her gaze wander for a long moment. "I used to dream about living somewhere peaceful like this," she said suddenly. Eli looked at her with interest. "You did?" "Yes," she answered. "But life had other plans. I always lived in crowded towns, noisy streets, busy markets, I never thought I would see a place where the sky feels close enough to touch. Eli smiled faintly. That's why I never left. There's something comforting about wide open space. It feels like freedom, she whispered. Eli didn't say anything more, but he understood exactly what she meant. Later that day, Mara offered to help gather eggs from the small hen house. Eli tried to insist he could handle it alone, but she gave him a gentle look that said she wanted to learn. So he walked with her, explaining how the hens were calm if approached slowly, and how to check if an egg was fresh. She listened with surprising interest, smiling when a curious hen tilted its head at her. Eli watched her laugh softly and felt something shift inside him. Her smile was small, but it lit up her face with a warmth he hadn't expected. He realized then that he liked seeing her happy more than he should. Perhaps, but it was the truth. For the rest of the afternoon, Mara stayed close to the house, exploring little corners she hadn't had the energy to notice before. She found an old bookshelf filled with dusty volumes and leafed through them slowly. She found a wooden figurine Eli's father had carved many years ago and admired the careful work. She even found a small, half-forgotten garden patch behind the house, where a few stubborn flowers still bloomed. By evening, the air cooled and the sky turned soft shades of red and gold. Mara stepped onto the porch to watch the sunset. Eli joined her quietly, leaning on the railing beside her. It had become a quiet routine between them, unspoken but natural. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice almost in awe. "It always is," Eli replied. Mara let the moment linger before speaking again. "I never told you. But the night before I left, I didn't think I would ever see anything beautiful again." Eli turned his head slightly. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, but her voice softened. "Everything felt dark and uncertain. I didn't know who to trust. I felt like the world was closing in on me." She paused. "But then I came here." "You're safe here," Eli said gently. "Yes," she whispered. "I feel that." Comfortable silence spread between them, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. The next morning, Eli found Mara sitting at the kitchen table reading a small book she had found on the shelf. She looked peaceful, absorbed in the pages. He smiled without meaning to. It was strange seeing someone in his home like this, someone who brought warmth simply by existing. His house had always been orderly and quiet, but now it felt lived in, as if a missing part had finally returned. When Mara looked up and caught him watching, she smiled softly. "I hope you don't mind. I like reading in the morning." "I don't mind at all," he said. She closed the book gently and rested her hands on it. "Eli, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you live alone out here? Don't you ever feel lonely?" Eli hesitated. He rarely talked about himself, but something about her question felt genuine, kind, not intrusive. He took a slow breath. "I used to have family here," he said. "My parents passed away, and the ranch became mine. I tried living in town for a while, but it didn't feel right. I like the quiet. It's simple, predictable, and peaceful," she added softly. He nodded. "Peaceful is good." Mara looked down at her hands. "I've never had peace. Not like this." She paused before continuing. "But I'm learning." Eli couldn't help but admire her quiet strength. Despite everything she had been through, she remained gentle. She didn't let hardship harden her. She still believed in kindness, and that, to him, was more remarkable than anything. As the days passed, Mara grew more comfortable in her new surroundings. She helped Eli with small tasks, learned how to carry water, practiced gathering vegetables from the small patch out back, and even began tidying parts of the house that Eli rarely touched. She didn't do it out of obligation, she simply wanted to contribute. One afternoon, Eli walked into the kitchen and found Mara dusting the shelves. When she noticed him, she quickly stepped back, worried she had overstepped. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to interfere." "You're not interfering," Eli said calmly. "The house looks better than it has in years." Mara's expression relaxed into a shy smile. "I like making things feel warm." "A home should feel that way." Eli nodded slowly. "It does." Their eyes met for a brief moment, calm, gentle, without any awkwardness. It was a moment that held something unspoken. It's like the quiet beginning of understanding. Later that evening, as they sat outside again, Mara spoke softly. Eli, I've been thinking about something. What is it? You've been very kind to me. More kind than anyone I've known in a long time. It's the right thing to do, Eli replied. I know. But it still matters. Looked down, her voice thoughtful. When I came here, I didn't know what would happen. I was scared and unsure and tired. But you helped me without asking for anything. You needed help, he said simply. Mara looked at him with soft eyes, and you gave it. The sky deepened to a richer shade of blue, and the first stars began to shine. Mara folded her blanket over her lap and breathed out slowly. I don't know what the future holds, she said. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I belong somewhere, even if it's only for now. Eli felt a warmth spread through him. You can stay as long as you want. There's no rush. What if I want to stay longer? She asked quietly, almost hesitant. Eli's heart thudded once, slow and heavy. He wasn't a man used to emotions rising without warning. He took a steady breath before answering. Then you stay longer. Mara looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening into something gentle and grateful. Something that felt like trust, like hope, like a beginning. Neither of them spoke after that. They didn't need to. The silence said enough that whatever was growing between them was real, slow and honest. And as the stars brightened above them, the quiet ranch no longer felt like a lonely place. It felt like a home shared by two people whose lives had crossed in the most unexpected way. Two souls slowly learning that peace. Kindness and gentle companionship could build something far stronger than they ever imagined. The morning the marshal arrived started like any other quiet. Calm and filled with soft golden light spreading over the ranch. Eli was out in the barn finishing chores, and Mara was pouring warm water into a bowl to wash the breakfast dishes. She hummed softly, something she rarely did before coming here. Life felt different now, lighter, steadier, almost like she had finally stepped into a place where her heart could rest. She lifted her eyes when she heard hoofbeats approaching on the dirt path. At first she thought it was one of the ranch hands from a neighboring property. But as the rider came closer, she recognized the uniformed coat. The county marshal, her breath paused for a moment, not from fear, but from the uncertainty of what news he might carry. Eli stepped out of the barn right then and saw the rider too. He wiped his hands on a cloth and walked toward the gate, his expression calm but alert. Mara stood on the porch, fingers gently curled around the edge of the wooden railing. The marshal dismounted, tipped his hat politely to Mara, then looked at Eli with the seriousness of a man who carried important news. "Morning, Turner," he said. "Morning," Eli replied. "I've got word about your guest," the marshal said, glancing briefly toward Mara with respect. "Figured I ought to come in person." Eli nodded. Mara stood still, waiting quietly. The marshal continued. "Her situation back east is settled. Everything that troubled her has been taken care of. The people who caused her harm have been found, and the law has them in hand." Mara exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering just a little. The relief flickered in her eyes like a small candle flame. The marshal went on, his voice gentle. "She's free. No one's searching for her, no danger, no claims, nothing hanging over her head. She can choose her own life now." He turned to Mara fully, offering her a respectful nod. "Ma'am, you're safe. Completely." Mara's hand came to her chest, as if she needed to steady her heart. For a moment she couldn't speak. Eli stepped closer, standing beside her without touching her, simply offering his quiet presence. "Thank you," she managed softly. The marshal smiled slightly. "You're lucky you found this place. Not many ranchers would take in someone without asking questions." Eli shook his head. "She needed help. That's enough." The marshal nodded, mounted his horse again, and tipped his hat. "If you need anything else, just send word. Otherwise, I wish you both good days ahead." With that, he rode off, leaving behind a peaceful silence. Mara watched until he disappeared down the road, then turned to Eli with eyes shining not with fear, but with emotion so deep, it made her look younger, lighter, hopeful in a way he had never seen before. "It's over," she whispered. "Yes," Eli said softly. "It's over." Mara folded her arms around herself, as if hugging an invisible past goodbye. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the truth settle inside her. Eli waited quietly, knowing this moment belonged to her. When she opened her eyes again, she looked at him in a way that made his breath hitch, gentle, grateful, warm. "You gave me a home," she said quietly, "when I had nothing left." "You needed one," he replied, almost in a whisper. "But you didn't have to say yes," she added. "Yet you did." Eli hesitated, then spoke honestly. "I didn't know why you came. I didn't know your story. But I knew you needed safe ground, and everyone deserves that." Mara stepped closer to him, not touching him, but close enough that he could feel her presence, like a soft warmth in the cool morning air. "I do have safe ground now," she said. Here, Eli felt something shift inside him, something deep, slow, and strong. For the next several hours, the ranch felt unusually peaceful. Mara finished washing the dishes, then walked through the garden, touching leaves and small flowers with thoughtful hands. She knelt beside a stubborn flower she had tended the past week and smiled at how it stood upright again. Eli watched her from a distance as he fixed a fence post. He could see the change in her clearly now. She moved with gentler steps, lighter shoulders, and a calmness that came from knowing her past no longer controlled her future. By midday, Mara returned to the porch and sat quietly waiting. Eli joined her with 2 cups of warm tea. They sat side by side, not speaking at first. It was enough simply to sit together. After a long moment, Mara broke the silence. "Eli, if I asked you something, would you answer honestly?" He turned his head slightly. "Always." She looked at her hands, then at the open field stretching beyond the fence. "Now that I'm free, I can choose where I go next. I can go anywhere." He nodded, though the idea of her leaving stirred a small ache in his chest. Still, he kept his voice steady. "You should choose what's best for you," she hesitated. "That's what I've been thinking about all morning." Eli waited patiently. Mara drew in a slow breath as if gathering courage. "When the marshal told me everything was over," she began, "my first thought wasn't about going somewhere new." Her voice softened. It was about staying. Eli's heart thudded once, slow and heavy. He didn't move, didn't speak, simply listened. "I've been safe here," she continued. "I've been at peace. I've felt cared for, seen, and welcome." Her voice trembled slightly, though not from fear. "I haven't felt that in a long time." Eli swallowed. "You're welcome here as long as you want." Mara looked up at him fully now. Her eyes were bright, steady, and filled with emotion she could no longer hide. "But I don't want to stay just as a guest," she whispered. "I want to stay as something more." Eli's breath caught. He felt the world shift quietly around him. Mara stood slowly, hands clasped in front of her, her voice soft but certain. "Eli, you opened your home, your time, your heart, without asking for anything. You treated me with kindness I didn't expect. You made me believe in gentle people again." She took a small step closer. "I don't want to leave this place. I don't want to leave you, and if you'll have me, I want to stay as your wife." The words hung in the air, warm and trembling, filled with honesty and hope. Eli stared at her for a long, quiet moment. He felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from a deep emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. He wasn't a man of many words. He never had been. But now he found them with clarity. "Mara," he said softly, "you changed this home the moment you stepped into it. I didn't realize how empty it was until you filled it with your presence." Her eyes softened even more. "I never expected anything from you," he continued. "Yet somehow, every day you've been here, it felt right, natural, like you belonged." A small tear slid down Mara's cheek, though her smile remained steady. Eli took a breath, stepped closer, and spoke the truth he had been carrying quietly in his heart. "If you're asking to stay as my wife, then my answer is yes. With all my heart, yes." Mara let out a breath she had been holding for days, maybe even months. Her shoulders relaxed, and her hands trembled gently as she pressed them to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. They didn't need anything more. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures. Just two hearts choosing one another with quiet certainty. Word spread in town within a week, not because they announced it loudly, but because people noticed things. Mara walking beside Eli with calm joy, Eli looking less solitary. The simple rings on their hands, in the way they returned to the ranch. Hand in hand, comfortable and steady, as though they had been walking together for years. People didn't whisper out of judgment, they whispered out of surprise and warmth. After all, Eli Turner had always been the quiet rancher who kept to himself. And now he had a partner who brought light back into his life without trying. When Eli and Mara stepped onto the porch that evening, married in a simple, heartfelt ceremony, the ranch felt different. Not just a home, a shared life. Mara looked out over the land that had become her safe ground. She turned to Eli and smiled a soft, peaceful smile that said everything without words. The crate that once held fear had opened a door to a new beginning. Eli hadn't just opened a wooden box that day. He had opened his life, and he walked out with a wife not by accident. Not by chance, but by a choice. Both hearts made with quiet, honest love.